Welcome to this Text Help Coffee Talk, a silver bullet for literacy support. Text Help and BCSE have found it. I'm really excited to have you with us and to be talking to Nick Williams from BCSE today. Nick and I chose this title for this webinar because we know that so many educators are feeling a real sense of urgency around improving student literacy. And wherever we can share successes and replicate the good work that are going on that's going on in our schools, we know that students win from that. I do want to let you know that today's webinar is being recorded, so you'll have a chance to share it with others and rewatch it at your convenience. We do have a place in the panel to submit your questions, so please feel free to submit questions as they come up, and we'll work on getting to those throughout the webinar. So my name is Joni Degner. I'm the Text Help Territory Director for Indiana and Michigan schools, and I'm joined today by Nick Williams. Nick is the Technology Director for BCSE, that's Bartholomew Consolidated School Corporation in Columbus, Indiana. BCSE is a school district in South Central Indiana that is nationally known for its implementation of universal design for learning. And BCSE has been using Read and Write, Text Help's comprehensive literacy toolbar, for over a decade. They've been using Read and Write to help remove barriers to literacy, to create more inclusive learning environments, and to really move UDL implementation at BCSE. So Nick, can you tell us a little bit more about your role at BCSE?
Yes, thanks everyone for joining us today. So I am the Director of Technology and have been for a couple years, but I was a teacher here for over 10 years. I was a biology teacher and started out that way. Our district went one-to-one, adopted an LMS 5 years ago, and created a coordinator of instructional technology position. So I transitioned into that, and then am now the technology director. So I've seen our district grow a lot over the years, but one thing that's going to be very apparent, we hope, throughout this webinar is that our focus is in our district is universal design for learning, or UDL. So almost everything we look at is through that lens. And again, we'll be talking about that throughout this webinar.
So as I had mentioned before, I know that many of us are feeling a real sense of urgency around improving student literacy. And that's because we know that when students struggle with literacy, they are likely to struggle in nearly every curricular area. We know that literacy is not just a barrier in English language arts classes, but it can also be a barrier in math classes, science classes, social studies, and even our career and tech ed classes. So we titled today's webinar A Silver Bullet for Literacy. Text Help and BCSE have found it because although maybe we know there's no real silver bullet for success, we do know that lots of people are looking for it. And from our perspective, we do think we found the right solution, the solution that can serve all learners. But I want to just point out this statistic that I think is sometimes disheartening, but I think it's also, this statistic is a real opportunity. That in Indiana, fewer than 50% of our students pass the most recent ELA proficiency state exam. And again, while I think sometimes we look at a statistic like that, we think, well, that's disheartening. We also at Text Help see that as a real opportunity, because we do know that we have solutions that can make a tremendous impact on student literacy. So today's focus, some of the things that you're going to hear about from Nick, you'll hear all about the learners that BCSE serves, the specific literacy challenges that they face, which I think many of you will find to be quite common to your own, how universal design for learning drove their need to be proactive in their approach to student literacy, and how they discovered Read and Write, a solution that has worked for them. So Nick, can you tell us a little bit about BCSE? Just give us a sense of who your learners are and what drives decision making at BCSE.
All right, gladly. So BCSE, or Bartholomew Consolidated School Corporation, is in Southern Indiana. Not a place that you'd probably associate with a lot of diversity, but on the bottom of that chart there, or the image that you see, we do have around 11,500 students, and we are quite diverse. So we have over 60 different languages spoken in our district. 11% are ELL, 4% have 504s, and 13.5% qualify for special services. And we're about a 45% free and reduced district, and also, again, with the languages, carry a lot of ethnic diversity as well. Part of that diversity comes in from industry that is in Columbus, Indiana. So we're one of the largest manufacturing hubs in the United States. We're the headquarters of Cummins Engine Company, and because of that, there's a lot of other manufacturers in our area. So our population is a little bit more diverse than you might first think about Southern Indiana. But one of the things that we value as a school district is that we know that students are going to be diverse and different in their learning styles. So our focus is all around Universal Design for Learning, or UDL. And under that umbrella, we focus a lot on cultural responsiveness, PBIS, student resilience, literacy, and rigor. We take a lot of pride in the courses that we offer, K through 12, and really even on to adult learners. And one of the ways that we supplement that is we look at our learning environment. How are we able to serve that diversity? One of those ways is with devices. So we are a one-to-one environment, first grade through 12. In kindergarten, we have a little bit of everything, including iPads, but Chromebooks mainly 1 through 8, and laptops 9 through 12. And then our main kind of productivity platforms are Google, and then we have a district-wide LMS that we're also very proud of, and that's It's Learning. All of those tools aren't looked at as another initiative. They're looked at as part of our UDL environment and how we can support those learners, which I think is a little bit unique from other districts we've talked to.
So Nick, I'm going to ask you to just kind of walk through some of the literacy challenges that you guys have looked at specifically to make decisions around your devices and around your platforms and the tools that you make available, like Read and Write.
All right, so when you think about literacy, it's across all content areas, so it's really applicable for every teacher and really every aide and every support staff that we have in our buildings. And it's not just reading, but also writing. So we, again, really think about how we can make our schools and our classrooms kind of the best they can be when it comes to teaching literacy, because it really does affect everyone. And it can be a barrier to all curriculum, as it says there. And what we know is that we also have readers who are below grade level and possibly need just different options, different scaffolds to get them to understand. And that includes language barriers on top of already kind of some of those difficulties that students may have coming in. So we really focus on trying to have as inclusive of an environment for everyone. And again, that's kind of our goal, is to make sure that every classroom is designed intentionally to support all learners, including students with learning disabilities or ELL. So we want them to have sheltered instruction. We don't want pullouts. We don't want any student to have any type of stigma associated with how they're learning or what they're learning because of barriers. We know all students are going to struggle some way, somehow, in some classes. So we don't want anybody to feel that they are excluded in any way. So that's important values for us. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think you hit on something really, really important here, which is this notion that all students will struggle, right? That it's not if, but when, right? So no student is categorically one thing. We know that everybody has strengths and weaknesses, and it's our job to help students reach their full potential. And so I love what you're saying, because I really think that a lot of the challenges that you outlined are probably pretty common to all of us. And I think that it's really easy when you're facing these challenges to get into like a triage situation where you're cobbling together solutions in a way that's kind of reactive, and instead of being proactive. So identifying like what your student population is, identifying what your student needs are, and really trying to serve them in a way that's proactive. Because we know at the end of the day, when we kind of start cobbling together solutions, first, it's just not very inclusive in its design. You know, one of the things that you said is we want students to be included without stigma, right? That we want to honor the way that students learn, and that no one should have a stigma connected to the tools that they're using or the ways that they're learning. So I really love what you're saying, and I think that really resonates, probably with a lot of our listeners. And so I want to then kind of transition into talking about where text help comes in here, because one of the things that we know is that you guys have been with text help for over a decade. And so text help is the producer of not just Read and Write, which is the one that we're going to be talking about today with Nick, but also text help is a company that developed Fluency Tutor, a digital running record, Snapverter, an add-on to Read and Write that converts text into accessible PDF files, Equatio, our digital math and STEM solution, and our latest solution, WriteQ, our writing fluency solution. So we're going to focus our conversation on Read and Write. And Read and Write is, today we're going to focus on Read and Write for Google Chrome, because that's the version that Nick and his learners at BCSC are using. But one of the things that I think makes Read and Write such an incredibly impactful tool is that it is agnostic to platforms, as you can see. But as Nick had mentioned, it's also agnostic to curricular areas. We know that students are going to struggle with literacy in lots of different learning environments. So Read and Write is agnostic, not just to platforms, but also to curricular areas and to grade levels. And so just to give you a little snapshot of the Read and Write toolbar, Read and Write has an unprecedented 20 tools, over 20 tools available on its toolbar, and updates based on user feedback frequently. We've got over 22 million users currently using Read and Write, and that is growing. We've won Google's Technology Partner of the Year award, and we're very proud of the work that we've been doing with schools like BCSC. So I want to let Nick talk a little bit more about how they use Read and Write to be more proactive in their approach to literacy. So Nick, tell us a little bit about that.
No problem. So again, Joni just said that we've been customers for 10 years, and that is very true. We actually were using Read and Write for Gold, which is a Windows application, before we went to Chromebooks, and it's just been a natural transition into that. And with any technology, you want it easy to use. I'm going to go off the kind of last point here first. It's easy to use. You want it to work, so you want it to be reliable. And then for a school that doesn't have a lot of resources, schools are all very tight in terms of money, we want to make sure that we're investing in tools that support our goal of universal design for learning, but also kind of makes sense financially. And this hits all of those check marks. It's very reliable for our classes and students. The tools that she showed, there's over 20, but you can actually customize it so it's not too overwhelming, because you can. And again, it works pretty much with all of our curriculum across the board, and is expected. So this tool came to us kind of in the right timeline. So we our instructional framework is universal design for learning, and we started piloting that about 10 years ago, about when we started using Read and Write. So what we wanted to focus on were solutions that work for every student, and again, across curriculum. So we want to focus on instruction. We don't want teachers to blame students and just kind of throw their hands up and and be done. We don't have any solutions, but we also want to make sure our kids have tools that can help them break down barriers for learning, especially when it comes to literacy. And Read and Write does that for all of our students, and that's language barriers, writing barriers, reading barriers, can even do audio instruction that we've seen between students and teachers in that as well. And then in doing so, we are proactively planning for the diversity that we're going to see in our classrooms, and also knowing the diversity of learners. And again, going to that, back to that point that kids are going to struggle no matter what at some point. Do they have the right tools to get them through that? Do they know them? And are they available and also reliable? So again, those are all type of check marks and things that we look at with partners of ours that we're going to invest in for the whole district. And Text Help has been one of our best.
So you've talked a little bit about universal design for learning and how text help, and specifically how Read and Write fits into that picture. Can you talk a little bit then about how Read and Write has helped move UDL at BCSE?
Yeah, absolutely. So without getting into the weeds too much of UDL, it's a lot about student options and choice. So Joni and I actually had conversations about our own kids and how when we're noticing them on their phones or on a device, they're looking at images, they're watching videos, they're reading articles, looking up what things mean. That is all part of what we want our students to do with any curriculum. So that's what we really focus on when we're talking about Read and Write with our students, is that we want them to keep engaged in the content. We don't want them to just sit there because they don't understand it. They don't necessarily know what a word means. And Read and Write provides text, provides images, allows them to explore the meaning of what certain words or sentences or just anything really can kind of help them break down or decode the language that is in whatever they're asked to do. So we're hoping, and we hope, and when we see this from day to day in terms of this tool, being able to keep students engaged with what they're in, and then hopefully that will help with sheltered instruction, making it inclusive, and kind of have a comprehensive tool for everyone to use. And then the last point here with UDL is, besides engagement, is that we want students to have choice in how they learn through representation, but also be able to show teachers that they know what they're talking about with having too many barriers. So Text Help and Read and Write specifically within Google Docs, which is our main productivity tool, or within our LMS, allows them to choose between audio, between written, between producing images, or even like a comic strip. It can help bring in all of those tools and resources for them to express what they know to teachers, which is the end result there.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, I think what we're talking about is, how do we help students discover their greatest potential, right?
Yep.
And then we're all going to discover that in different ways. And that it's really important to have comprehensive tools in every classroom that not just help teachers deliver high quality instruction, but also help students really show the very best of themselves. So I want to, you've heard us talk a little bit about UDL. And so I think it's important, like as Nick talks about the things that he's doing at BCSE, I think it's important to know what are the goals for students at BCSE. Obviously, they're going to have a lot of similar goals to the schools that are around them. But because they're a UDL district, they've got some pretty specific objectives for their learners. The goal of universal design for learning is to help create expert learners. And expert learners, according to the UDL framework developed by CAST, the qualities of an expert learner are students who are purposeful and motivated, students who are knowledgeable and resourceful, and students who are strategic and goal directed. And so the truth is, even if you aren't implementing UDL, I think that these expert learner outcomes are pretty desirable to educators. I think if you said to a teacher, like, wouldn't it be great to have kids like this? They'd say, yes, give me all of them. But what we also know is that our community and our parents and our students really benefit from us developing students who are expert learners, right? And so one of the things that I want to give Nick an opportunity to talk about is how Read and Write has helped promote expert learning at BCSD.
Yep. And so these are, yeah, I don't want to call them soft skills, but these are the skills that all of our community members are asking for. We actually have a board that we bring in of, it's called the Business Advisory Group, and they talk about some of the gaps they see when they're hiring our former students or kind of just students in general, potential candidates for jobs. And they aren't going to be, we don't hear that, you know, they need more algebra. It's more of these skills, being purposeful, motivated, knowledgeable, resourceful, strategic, and goal directed, that we're looking for. So one of the things that you have to do in BCSC to kind of show that you can really accomplish all these are senior projects. So it doesn't matter if you are scraping by trying to get enough credits to graduate, or you are college bound and really know where you're going, you have to do a senior project. So one of the things that I've seen firsthand is we had a student that was at our alternative school, again, kind of struggling to graduate, had lots of barriers in life and just in general with learning to get them there. But you're required to write a paper. You're required to send emails out to community members and do service learning, and you have to give a presentation in front of a board. So I was one of the judges or panelists on this board presentation. So what I was able to learn from them is that they overcame all of these barriers with literacy, whether it again be writing, reading, with text help and with Read and Write specifically. So they use the audio to text feature to be able to express what they're knowing in language that made sense to them, but then also be able to look up and decode things that they were communicating back and forth with on email with different people in our community, and also create a nice presentation and be able to show what they've learned through this, through those tools. So they knew that what tools to use. They knew their limits and boundaries and really kind of stretched themselves to get to the end, and came up with quite an impressive senior project presentation, the end result that we saw at the end, to allow them to help them graduate and again show BCSC that really they're develop these areas of expert learning.
So one of the things that I really love that you're talking about, I think that if you are an educator, specifically somebody in a position like yours, Nick, where you're actually looking for solutions to bring to a school, and that I would say that probably one of the things you're looking for is like economy of scale, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so how can I choose something that will help as many kids as I can possibly get, right? And that also kind of feeds into that inclusive environment, inclusion without stigma. Like, how can I adopt tools and resources that will help as many of my kids as possible? And one of the things that I really love is that a lot of times when we talk about, I think, when we're talking about literacy tools, that maybe we kind of think about really young students, or we think only about really struggling students. But here you are talking about a senior project that every kid at BCSC has to do in order to graduate. And you're talking about students who are a college bound and workforce bound, kind of up and out and kind of on their way into starting a new chapter in their life, also using these tools,
Yep.
right? And one of the things that I just want to point out too is that these tools are actually widely used in post-secondary education. So it's not like what you're doing really is you're showing them tools that they're likely going to encounter as they move on to workforce, as they move into a post-secondary experience. So really love what you're saying. I love some of the economy of scale, I think, that you're highlighting, because what you're telling me, I think, is that this is something that can help a first grader who's acquiring some of their very first literacy skills, but also my valedictorian or my senior who might be on a college and career path. So I think that's really, really powerful. So with you guys having been with Text Help and using Read and Write then for over a decade, I feel certain that you guys probably have some really great implementation pointers or maybe some lessons that you've learned along the way. And I'd love for you to share a little bit of that.
Yeah, no problem. So with any successful implementation that we've had, and we consider Read and Write one of the most successful, is that everyone needs to be included. And that's not talking about students necessarily, but all departments. So as the technology director, we really reach everyone in the district. We impact them somehow. But whether that's your ELL director, special ed, title services, your curriculum directors or superintendents, this project really started before my time as tech director, but it was evident that everyone was included, everyone buys in, everyone knows that it's a tool, and it's not looked as one more thing. So that is extremely important. The other one is that it needs ongoing professional development, and there's a couple reasons for that. One is that our teacher turnover has been high, and I think everyone is experiencing that um, around the country really right now. So making sure that this is a priority to be taught to your teachers, to be taught to the students, so that they know that it's a tool that, again, they can have from when they enter our schools in pre-K and when they graduate at 12th grade. So making sure that it's a consistent tool all the way across helps as well. But that professional development piece is key. The other one, as Jody mentioned earlier, they're updating all the time. So on top of the professional development of just getting everyone to know that it's a tool and how to use it, is that you need to teach them the updates as they come out. So making sure it's timely and being able to do that in a fashion that makes sense to everyone as well. So those have been, I think, kind of our main ones there is inclusion, professional development, and then the consistency over a decade. There's not many things that stick around for a decade in education. This has been
That is
one of
so
them
true.
in our district. Tests change, curriculum changes, but this has not.
Fantastic. And so I want to also, I mean, with so much intentionality around implementation and around inclusion, I think you guys have really also had some very powerful successes. So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to share that as well.
Yep. So I think, and Joni and I were talking about this earlier, one of the best successes we don't necessarily have a number on, but anytime that we're looking at new curriculum, which is really every year at this point, it is an expectation of all of our teachers that we bring in, all of our department chairs or principals, that Read and Write has to work with that curriculum tool and they want to see it. So Read and Write already has built-in features to read PDFs on top of just HTML5 or websites or whatever it may be. But when we're looking at that digital curriculum, it has to work with Read and Write, and that's extremely important to us. It's part of our culture is what that tells us, and we want to continue that. The other thing that it helps us allow us to do is, again, thinking about inclusion, is that 80% of our students with special needs spend 80% of their day in general ed classes. We really want everyone to have access to all of our core content with the same rigor. That goes down to our AP courses. Our AP courses are open in the high school to anyone, and we pay attention to the diversity in those classes and really push students who may not think of themselves as an AP student to stretch themselves. And I think that's possible in part because of the tools that we give them to allow for success in those really difficult classes with academic language that's going to create a lot of barriers. And then again, kind of looking just at some national scores, our graduation rates, AP scores, ACT scores, SAT scores have been well above national averages. We're actually our high schools are in AP honorary school of some sort that they got recognition for because of how well our students have done in those in the past. So we take extreme pride in what we do, but we're also pretty intentional and thoughtful about how we get there, I feel.
So for those of you who are listening and wondering how to answer the literacy challenges you face, let us help. You can connect with Nick to get more insights, advice, and testimony. Nick's email address is right up there on the screen. Teachers can install Read and Write and get free access to all of Read and Write's premium features, even before we have a conversation about your students or piloting or anything like that. Teachers can install and use the premium features of Read and Write. If you want to see Read and Write in action and learn more about the impact it can have on your learners, you can view our new 15-minute overview at at text.help/RW demo. And lastly, get in touch with me at j.degner@texthelp.com. TextHelp provides free pilots of Read and Write to allow students and teachers to test drive all of these tools. I'm also really happy to come and visit with you and your leadership team to help you assess the literacy challenges that you face and to help you find the right solutions. I want to thank you so much for joining us. A huge thank you to Nick for sharing his time with us, to BCSE for sharing their success story with us and for being valuable partners, and for helping us at TextHelp accomplish our mission, which really is to help all students reach their greatest potential. We're so grateful that we have partners like BCSE and like Nick, and we look forward to being partners with all of you listening. So thanks so much and enjoy the rest of your day.